This embassy has, some may say, a kind of like a certain impression of being like a boat. You'll notice there's six.
Yeah, correct.
There's six pillars, as it were. These are Jerusalem stone. This is stone that we bought from Jerusalem. You know, in Jerusalem, every building has to be built with a certain type of stone. And we bought these stones from Jerusalem, and there's 6 pillars. And each pillar represents from the 6 million. So this is the way it is. It has a certain impression of a boat, and when you saw in my room the window is a bit not even, then that's part of being in a ship. And so,
is it a
so I feel like
meaning?
I feel like not just an ambassador, but I feel like I'm a captain of a ship.
Correct.
So this is the whole of the embassy, and obviously it's really 2 minutes from my residence, so it's very convenient. No traffic in the morning.
Yeah, no traffic, no.
Please.
Thank you. First, all looks very delicious and smells very good. It's very delicious. And would you like to tell what we're going to eat today?
Well, there's a selection of salads mainly. This is aubergine with tahina on it. This is grilled, and then you have tahina. You have some cauliflower, which is, I guess, roasted. Shakshuka, which is
very famous.
Very famous, I think, in the Middle East.
You usually eat breakfast?
This is more of a breakfast meal, but it's also can be done like this, eggs in a very spicy sauce, depending on how you like it. I like it spicy. This is a chopped salad, Israeli. They call it Israeli salad. This is very finely chopped, and you can also have different versions of what you put in it. You can have just tomatoes, cucumbers, and parsley, or something even like pickles and things like that. I do it with pickles to make it a bit more piquant. I like cooking myself.
Yeah, it was my question.
There's carrots, and then there's beetroots here, and then hummus, the famous hummus with, this is the hummus paste with eggs and the full chickpeas, and this is tahina, which is also very, it's also very good. It's once you start it, it's very difficult to stop. And then this is the famous pita. So what basically you need to do is you need to take the hummus, put some on your plate, and then you take the pita and you
shall I do like that?
Wipe it up. Yeah, that's so you have to do it.
Okay, I will try. And maybe 1,000 different ways hummus you can eat, yeah?
Oh yeah, you can have, some people have it with meat inside and various vegetables and things. So it's you can do it in many different ways, and
yeah, but very famous in Israel, and some other countries do different, probably Jordan, Turkey.
It's it's. I remember going once. I was in New York, and I was with an Arab diplomat. We became very good friends, but we became really good friends when we went to a restaurant, and we sat together and we had hummus like two Middle Easterners.
You order same things, yeah.
And it was. Then we realized, when you sit down and you eat together, you realize just also how many different types of foods you actually have in common, and it creates a whole different atmosphere. Because you see, it's not just the food; it's also the culture of the family, the warmth of the family, and children, parents, respect for parents. A lot of things that you discover that actually,
especially our eating.
We have so many more things in common than we have in disagreement.
Yeah. And how you say in Hebrew?
B'te'avon. B'te'avon. It means with appetite. B'te'avon.
Avon.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So you're doing it the wrong way. You need to take the pita and
with a big piece.
Yeah, like that, and then.
Yeah, I will have with my fork. It is very delicious. Very light and healthy.
Yep. And so, you know, they also have like things like falafel, which is more fried. We've tried to be more healthy.
Yes, they are.
On this thing, I mean, the falafel is also fried, so it's a bit more, but it's also, then there's a whole
Very
thing.
delicious,
Who discovered the falafel? Is it Israeli, Lebanese, whatever? So, you know, I'm out of practice in terms of...
We know Jewish cuisine has a long and rich history. And what are the cultural, religious and geographic impacts forming the Jewish cuisine?
I think a lot of Jewish cuisine basically also develops a lot from where Jews have come from. My father was born in Samarkand in Uzbekistan, and so they have a kind of like a cuisine which is similar to the local cuisine, which is has different rice dishes, and also not unlike Persian cooking. With rice dishes, stuffed pastries with meat inside, sambusak, samosa. A lot of people call it different ways, and you know, it was something that was on the Silk Route. Samarkand was on the Silk Route, so they had a lot of different influences from the food there. My mother is from a Spanish family, so we also have a different genre of cuisine, which is more like stuffed vegetables, for example. Also rice foods, and generally the Sephardi cooking is generally tends to be a bit more spicy and piquant than the Ashkenazi food. My wife is Ashkenazi, so she's very happy that she has a Spanish background husband who likes to cook. And
yeah, it's important. Correct. It is very important for a woman.
So we have a lot of good things, different cuisines. You know, the Ashkenazi, they have the famous gefilte fish, which is like minced fish that is cooked in a sort of like salt and a bit sweet as well. I'm not a great expert on that part of it, but you know, there are a lot of different dishes that have been associated with Jewish cooking.
It is really rich history, really. So you told that you are cooking very well, not very well.
Not bad.
Not bad. What dish are you cooking best?
You know, Balzac said, when I want to read a good book, I write one. So I try and say, when I want to eat a good meal, I cook it. Different things. I like making, there's one meal that we have on Saturday, for example, you know, because on Shabbat we don't put on a light. So it's something you cook from Friday over Saturday, and you put it in the oven. It's like stuffed peppers with meat and rice inside, and also pieces of meat and chickpeas, and you cook it overnight, and it's a really amazing dish.
I can imagine. As I know, in this area, a number of residents there are. Do you actually go to each other to entertain other ambassadors here?
We quite often have guests. The other day we had an event for the Hebrew University with about 60 or 70 people here. We had a lecturer of the head of the hematology department from Jerusalem come and give a lecture on the state of Israeli research in Hebrew University on this particular issue, and how they're breaking into new ground. The other day I had the ambassador of India. We had lunch here, and it was a great meal, great to meet her, such an amazing ambassador. And so we do a lot of things. We're planning also as we approach Pesach, Passover, which is traditionally a very family-oriented festival, talking about how the Jews left Egypt and were redeemed from slavery. So that's also a very big meal, so I'm sure we'll be doing a big dinner then as well. But until then, I think next week we have, tomorrow we have an embassy occasion celebrating Women's Day. which is very important in Israel. You know, I think, you know, our position on women has always been very forward-leaning, and it's very important for us to celebrate that. Next week we'll have the Weizmann Institute, which is a very advanced research, pretty much, I don't want to make comparisons, but a sort of research institute like Fraunhofer and Helmholtz. So there's a lot of occasions and a lot of activity that happens in the house here, apart from the fact that we live here.
But this is a house. This is a really house.
It's a home. It's our home.
Is it?
Yeah, we feel like that. You know, when you travel a lot, and then when you finally come back, and it has its warmth. Even though it's very representative and very formal downstairs, we have our own area where we can be more.
What about your family? Are they feeling same as you? Is it a home for them? Are they coming to visit?
Yes, they are. And you can hear my daughter, I think, up there. Yeah, my daughter lives with us. She's going to college in Berlin. She feels she likes it very much. Our kids, two of my sons, come quite often to Berlin. They love being in Berlin. They love visiting. They go out and, you know, go to a lot of bars, and you know, they're in their 20s, and they feel very much at home here. And we feel very comfortable and very safe.
Do you have your own time, free time?
Sometimes you know, sometimes it's kind of difficult to, you know, I was brought up, I was born and educated in England. And one thing I learned about being in England, that people like to have their space to themselves. And sometimes as ambassador, it's very difficult just to go somewhere and just be yourself, by yourself.
And like a tourist.
Right, and so you're kind of like very much accompanied, and so it's, there are times that you want to try and make time for yourself, and it's important because you do, you know, Germany's an incredibly interesting, a very complicated place. You can't just understand Germany from being in Berlin. You have to travel a lot, you have to meet different people to really understand the politics of everything. But you do need, so there's a very heavy social calendar in Berlin. I don't know of any other city that there are so many receptions and commemorations, and so there's a lot of things happening in the evening. So, you know, and you know, at my age, I also like try to exercise, go out on a bike and exercise a bit, and it's really important to get a bit of fresh air and get my muscles
for
going.
Relaxing.
Yep.
And do you have particular favorite part of Berlin? And what are things you enjoy most doing in Berlin? Or do you have no-go area in Berlin? No,
there's nowhere that we won't go. One of the places that we like very much, one of the things I think is very nice about Berlin are the lakes. Also very near here, there are different lakes that gives you a sense of being in the country, being in nature, seeing ducks, seeing swans, wildlife a bit, and those are things that I really like. To me, to be able to go out on a bike and to see and discover all of these different places around here. You know, and even sometimes we go downtown when it's quieter and everything. It's also nice to discover Berlin.
Safety?
I don't. It doesn't enter my mind of like it's safe, it's not safe. We just, you know, and there's frankly also quite a, you know, a serious amount of security. So I don't feel unsafe.
So what has been your most memorable moment in Berlin so far?
My most memorable moment is, well, it'll take me many moments to remember what is. But I think, look, for me, obviously, when I presented my credentials to President Steinmeier, that was a really, you know, that's an event in your life. And it was great to be there with my children. You know, you have a lot of pride in being, you know, an ambassador of Israel to one of the most important countries in the world. And also to meet, I'd met President Steinmeier before when he visited Israel, and he was such an incredibly good friend and a good colleague, and he's has an excellent relationship with our president, and it was a really, it was an amazing way to enter, as it were, formally German society. And I remember also meeting with the Chancellor for the first time when the President of Israel visited about a week and a half after I took office. And he had a long conversation with Chancellor Merkel, and to also get a sense of her leadership and how she's had such a very important, she has a tremendous input into the relationship between Israel and Germany. And not only between Israel and Germany, but between the relationship between the German people and the Israeli people and the Jewish people. I think it's a very important point to look at, and it's her contribution has been very substantial and immense, particularly from 2008 when she had the speech in the Knesset in Jerusalem. Mm-hmm. So there have been many special moments, and you know, meeting other German colleagues, meeting the Chief of Staff of the Bundeswehr, and it's all of a sudden you're sitting with the head of the German army, and here you are, an Israeli, a Jew. It's not just like another meeting with, you know, between an ambassador and a chief of staff. It has a lot of, when you're all of a sudden in the moment, you realize, wow, that's a very special moment.
And we know there are many Jewish holidays and religious and special days like Shabbat, Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah. Mm-hmm. Would you like to talk about how do you celebrate these special days and what are the rituals?
Well, you know, Shabbat is basically starts on Friday evening and usually meant for family meals, and that's usually when we kind of like tend to really want to relax. Sometimes we have friends over on Friday night because it's a less formal occasion, and we're able to sort of also relax in a more extended family. And then Yom Kippur is a very solemn day. We're not supposed to eat from sundown to sundown the next day, so it's like 25 hours. Yeah. It's a long time. So I generally walk to a synagogue in the evening and then in the end of the day. So, you know, these are, and you know, I celebrate it pretty much as we celebrate it in Israel.
And I would like to ask about your career. How did you first involve in politics and diplomacy? Was it your dream, or did it happen naturally? Or did your father's job had an effect for you, on yours?
Well, no, actually my father was a businessman. He was a businessman in precious stones, and I guess my sister actually gravitated towards that, but I went to study in university. I studied law. I specialized in international law, and then I did my master's in international relations. And for me, then I went back to live in Israel. My parents were Israeli. I went back to live in Israel, and to me, the natural...
You were in university, yeah? When you go back, you were in university.
Yeah, I was in university up till 1977, and then I went to Israel. Mm-hmm. And for me, it seemed, I went into the army pretty much as soon as I came back to Israel. And then it seemed to me very natural to go to the foreign ministry and to go into diplomacy, because I was a lawyer in the beginning, but having studied law and it was my first job in the ministry, I was actually dealing with law, but then I realized I want to be in the policy area, and I want to be making the decisions and not just giving advice. You know, on the one hand you should think of this, on the other hand you should think of that, and in the end the policy people have to make the decision anyway. And I wanted to be in that capacity of being able to make that decision. And over the time, I was head of the Strategic Affairs Department in Israel, the first one, the first Deputy Director General. I served in Washington twice. I served previously in New York in the UN mission. And then I was the Vice Director General. So it was to me, it was a career that, you know, fitted my aspirations and allowed me to go, as it were, from the bottom to the highest professional position in the foreign ministry, which I, you know, was happy to be able to achieve. What
was the hardest moment of your career?
Well, the hardest moment of my career was actually more in a personal manner. I was appointed to be ambassador to India, and my father was diagnosed at the time with lymphoma, and he was living in England, and I decided that even though I'd been appointed and accepted by the Indian government, I felt that I couldn't go out, and I had to stay and remain with my father. So that was a very tough period in time when the kind of what you're doing professionally came with the personal consideration, and I felt that then I had to not go out to India. And while I regret not having been ambassador to India, I think there are times when, you know, your heart decides to do something that not your mind doesn't necessarily understand, but you know that that's the right decision, and that's a very tough time for me. But other times I've got to say I've had a very, you know, interesting career, very challenging, a lot of contacts with other Arab diplomats, visiting Arab countries in the Middle East, and trying to push forward our relations with these Arab countries, which to me is a very crucial and major goal of any foreign policy that Israel has.
And you are active on social media, such as Twitter. How do you think social media and digital platforms affected diplomacy and politics?
They've changed it a lot, and they've made it more immediate. The flow of information is very quick. A lot of information can come to you from many different sources by using a platform like Twitter. And I feel that it makes me more informed. You obviously have to be very much more careful of things,
sure,
because not always things that you see on social media are necessarily accurate, and you have to be very careful in terms of what you use, what information you use, what you retweet, that essentially is not necessarily your own information. So I generally tend to use these platforms only when I know personally that what I'm doing, it reflects the situation as I see it, and not just as somebody else may see it. And I think it's important to be able to try and, you know, stimulate different points of view, look at things in different ways from different perspectives, and I think, you know, Israel can only gain from that.
What do you think about politicians having polemics on social media? Sometimes you are watching them.
Well, you know, as I said, I'm a professional diplomat, so I won't pass judgment on politicians. They generally pass judgment on us. But look, I think, you know, politicians, everyone who is involved in social media, at the end of the day, has a responsibility to try and inform people, to try and find ways of bringing people together. And like I said previously in what we're talking about, to build bridges and not burn them. And so I think that everyone shares that responsibility. And sometimes you see on social media people are less than polite and can be very brutal and very rude. And I think it's to me very sad that people can't engage in a conversation in a serious and balanced way.
Right. With what features the Jewish community in Germany is standing out, do you think?
Look, it's a community that has gone through many different phases, and I think it's a community that clearly the German government wants to be, to grow, to develop, and wants to become again part of German life. It's interesting when Felix Klein was appointed as the Federal Commissioner in the struggle against anti-Semitism, he was also appointed, part of his title is also to promote Jewish life in Germany. So I think people, you know, the community is concerned at times with different things that happen, and we talked before about certain acts of anti-Semitism. But I think that we all must stand together very clearly and continue to ensure that the Jewish community is highly protected, and we need again to be on the offensive against anti-Semitism, to make, and every form of xenophobia, racism, to make sure that people can live their lives as they wish.
And as a last question, where do you see Israel in the future?
Look, I want to see Israel in the future with a country that is living in peace with all of its neighbors. I strongly believe that the trends go in that direction. I don't think the Middle East is always condemned to live in instability. To me, I want to see Israel as a productive, positive element of force for stability and moderation in the Middle East, because I think that's what we need in the area. And I believe that there can be a common future between us and other Arab countries based on what I can see on a day-to-day level and the interests that begin to converge so intensely between our countries.
Dear Ambassador, thank you very much for your hospitality. And we were very happy to be with you. It was a privilege for us to be with you here in your house.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you.